Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Val Evans. Why am I showing the simple astrology method? Because there's so many people that want just clues. They don't want to hear about trines and aspects and all of that jazz because it's just too confusing. So I came up with something pretty simple so that you can still understand the mindset of a person when they're born, which is Mercury. And then as they get a little bit older, around 5 or 6, Jupiter. And you have to know what the symbols are. So that's it. The other thing, you have to make sure you know which symbols are which when you're looking at a chart. But the other thing too is it doesn't stop there. Once Jupiter finishes up, it goes into either Mars if you're a male or Venus if you're a female. And you can see in your chart, say you're a female, you see where Venus is. And you can see how your life would play out as soon as you became a woman, which varies from person to person. And then you're going to be able to see how that criminal, if you look at these planets in the criminals charts, how they fared, what they ended up doing. This is Bryan Kohberger's chart, which we talked about in the last show, which you can check out. This is when he was a young boy, and you can see Mercury, which is where now he's in that chart. If the boy's about that size, he's in Jupiter. But as a young child, even 0 to 5, he might have been a little bit mischievous as a kid. But his experience was introverted. He liked being by himself. He might have had some obsession, because Scorpio is obsession. If you know the Kardashians, which I always like to talk about when I'm talking about Scorpio, the Kardashians are both Scorpio and Pisces energy. One thing that the Kardashians say sometimes, which I think they coined or made popular, is I'm so obsessed with that, or I'm obsessed with something. Okay, that's Scorpio energy. So there could be some obsessions that happened when he was a little kid. Also shows annihilation of things, of pets, of animals. That's part of his background, possibly. So there's Mercury 0 to 5 years or 0 to 4 years, depends. I moved when I was about 5 or 6. But once we get into 5 and 6 years old, we're starting to get to Jupiter. And you can see here with the North Node right next to Mercury, that is, it's a malefic. I think he knew what he needed to do, his Mercury, which showed that he was, obsessed with something, but really, really obsessed. And why? It's because of the North Node right to the left of Mercury. It's a lot of extra obsession. And I think he might have known at an early age, this is Bryan Kohberger, that he wanted to kill, or that he was fascinated with death. And then this was the chart that I showed last night of Bryan Kohberger, a chubby misfit, which is what he was called. It's fascinating that Bryan Kohberger, when he was Jupiter between 5 and 6 and 12, 13, he had that Pluto. I mean, he was super obsessed with something. Now in the third, I don't know if it was in the third house because I just pulled it for midnight of that day. But it could be at least with Jupiter and Pluto there. That's a lot of thinking deeply at the very least. And he early on, I think, he was very intrigued by psychology. So something would pave the way, I think, at around this time, these formative years. But I mean, you got to I fall short of saying that I feel sorry for killers, but what if it was that way? What if we didn't have a choice and we were put into this environment? Do we have a choice? After so much research that I've done, I feel like we have little choice. I really do. So Yes. You feel vengeful, but you get vengeance from cutting people off in my life. Yes. My sister's also moon in Scorpio, and we've cut each other off in our lives. And what's funny is I haven't done it to that many people, but yes, it's just like just cut. And I think that's Scorpio too. So I probably shouldn't like give away all of these personal details, but since there's not that many people on tonight, and it's a fact, it's not a personal opinion. I mean, facts are facts. So it's very difficult. It's difficult to have that Scorpio energy, but yeah, I mean, you can feel guilty. And this astrology, I think, has really helped me because I realized that for my family, I couldn't have had a more wholesome family. Like they were Quakers, they would go to church. My mom was an organist, and but they had a Scorpio family, so everybody had something different than the other one, and so it kind of formed jealousy, and it wasn't anybody's fault. So, somebody had a family, somebody didn't have a family and was free and had a lot of freedoms. Somebody, there might have been people born with, I mean, not to say they were all beauty queens, but maybe jealousy about certain features that some of us had and some of us didn't have. So there are all those things, and that's the reality in front of you. And that can happen in any part of your life. It can happen like every time you go to a job, or and you'll notice that I talk about career a lot because I'm very career minded. That's in my birth chart. But as an example, in like the career, suddenly you see things in front of you, like where people just have more than you do, and it's in front of you, and you can see it, and it's scorpionic energy that's doing that. So so I don't feel guilty anymore. I accept and I identify what's going on. If suddenly there's something that could make somebody else jealous, like if I walk into a room and I have a nicer outfit on than somebody else does, then I think, okay, don't worry about what everybody's feeling. This is Scorpio energy, just get through it. So I don't know, I'm probably the only person who thinks that way, but it does help. It helps the mindset. Anyway, let's move on. Now we have Bryan Kohberger again from last night. So interesting how his Mars is, I mean, it's right close to Regulus. And so King, which is what Regulus means, would be in his, um, in his environment. So Mars at 23 degrees. 23 degrees is the Aquarius degree. So this is a network of people, memberships. It's also sororities and fraternities. So that could also play out with that degree. Yes, King Road. Yep. Because of Leo. Leo is very King. And then you had a couple of other Regulus, which is the fixed star of King, and it's the royal degree. It's considered the royal degree. And you saw things that were French because Leo means French, or the French or France. And that was one of the boyfriends. His last name was Decor. So there were some French themes in there, which was interesting. So with Mars and Leo, Leo is bullying. It's just, and Mars actually does well with Leo, but because he has that square, that means that it didn't play out well for him. He was the victim of bullying, and let me see, just expand it real quick. Yeah, so take a look at that. Jupiter was when he was a boy, and it squared Mars and Leo. So automatically, you could see he was being bullied. And he was probably pretty depressed too because of that square to Saturn. Uh, Saturn is depression. So with Pluto in there, it's times a million. Like you, and I know it sounds like I'm being compassionate, but it's really understanding somebody's destiny and just analyzing it, I guess. Okay. Yeah. So, and this is where I was talking about how he's going to turn into Saturn, whenever, I mean, it's going to be a while, but when he turns 45, suddenly, if he has not been, uh, offed by death row or whatever, Saturn in that grand trine shows a big ease with something. Um, I think he's just going to become, to me, it shows great fame because of a moon trine there for a long time. It means infamy. So at the very least, he'll certainly become more infamous. And a lot of times, that's not the case. I mean, we forget about killers and we don't think about them as much anymore. Nobody really talks about Scott Peterson too much, except when he comes up for parole. But in this case, it just seems like maybe there's something Scorpio involved, a famous Scorpio or psychological publication that he puts together. Something very famous will happen. Okay. Uh, and then I talked about last night the Venus, which Venus in retrograde is very tough for men, and Mars retrograde, and actually it's really Jupiter retrograde for women's charts, which is the significant other. So for him, just and these women might have been very, very beautiful because 2 degrees is the best of the best. It's also Taurus, which is eating and food themes, and it's money, it's rich girls. So that's very interesting. Okay. So I spoke a little bit about Ted Bundy. He had Mercury in Scorpio as well, and Mercury's the thief, and in Scorpio, that is taking somebody else's money. And with Venus there, it means now, even though Mercury can show when you were a little kid, it's also your general mindset too. So it might be stealing other people's women or taking them. And he did that a couple of times when one of note was the victim at the I think it was in Aspen, and he basically stole a woman out from under a man's eyes, and she just went missing. So that was in the 70s. So, and then Jupiter in Scorpio again. So the same thing. It's interesting. I didn't really look. I mean, I knew the energy, and I could see a lot of similarities, but I didn't really compare their charts too much, especially using this simple astrology method. Mercury's when we're babies, Jupiter's when we're little kids, so child to kid. Then Venus woman, Mars man, Saturn the wise one or the old person. Okay. So, and then also I wanted to talk a little bit too about how Neptune was, now the way that it works is it moves to the right when it's going forward and it's counterclockwise. And when it hits your planets, it is very tough. It can show suddenly obsession. It can show, Pluto's more obsession. This is more addiction, addicted to things, addicted to sex, death, rebirth, all of that. But also remember, he suddenly had to disguise himself. So, and Neptune is the sign for disguise and also spies. But in his case, he wanted to change the way he looked. And he was actually, I mean, people said that he was like a chameleon. So, so Angel, you said, I feel empathy towards these sides of him, and he obviously fought against his demons. And yeah, it seems like you're talking about Brian there. And then you said, do you see these men never really grew up? Yes, they, especially with, I think it's that Scorpio revenge. It is, they always have that in their mind. They always remember that one person that made them feel bad. And they're going to just raise hell until they die. It is a long period for these people, these men, especially in this example, to just get back to to sting. So it's really interesting. And with Ted Bundy, he he admitted later that he just couldn't get over that first girlfriend leaving him. And also, I think there were those mother's issues too. With he didn't know who his mother was. It was just his. I mean, look at that fourth house. It is an absolute mess. It just shows just gross things that he had to deal with as a little kid, and his brain was just probably fried. He didn't care. So very, very tragic first years for him. So I was talking a little bit about that. Now I wanted to turn for a second to Charles Manson. And let's see here. Let me just expand it real quick. So he was a cult leader, a drug addict. And look at where Mercury is in green there in the sixth house. Okay. His in fact, let me just go over to share my screen. I think, hold on one second. I mean, his biography, obviously, we're talking about Charles Manson, who was an infamous cult leader. And I'm going to read the Wikipedia just for a second. So let me just share my screen. Okay. So he was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate, as you probably know. The prosecution contended that while Manson never directly ordered the murders, his ideology constituted an overt act of conspiracy. So let's go to his childhood. Born in 1934, Charles Mills Maddox, and he was born to a 15-year-old of Ashland, Kentucky. That's Ada. Manson's biological father appears to have been Colonel Walker Henderson Scott Sr., but in this case, it's kind of like Seinfeld. Remember Maestro? Well, this guy just called himself Colonel, and he made his son, Charles Manson, believe that he was a colonel, which he was not. He was just a con man. So he was a drunk. He was just a terrible father. So Manson was placed in the home of an aunt and uncle, and his mother was paroled in 1942. I mean, it's a complete disaster. So now what we'll do is I'll go over to, hang on one second. So here's his chart. Angel, you say, I think they place the blame on someone so they avoid taking any responsibility for their behavior. Yeah, Scorpio, somebody else. That's a possibility, I think. And they may have every right too. Sometimes they're right when, somebody does something to them. I don't know. This is a Scorpio talking, so I'm kind of biased. But look at how His Mercury is in Scorpio. How about that? So, of the three examples that I've shown, this is the third, which is Mercury in Scorpio. Somebody who just wants to get back, who just has that vengeful thinking and will stop at nothing. And you'll see that Mercury, both Mercury and Jupiter. So that's a lot of years there. That's Mercury is 0 to Jupiter. I mean, that's to 15. And so he was a criminal when he was younger. So a thief, he did everything that Mercury in Scorpio is, which is a big thief. Not all Mercury and Scorpios are thieves, but if you've got, you might even be good at it and you don't even know it if you do have Mercury in Scorpio. But you can see here that it's at the apex of a T-square, which is that red triangle, and that's always the cause of someone's downfall. You can see he's also going to be very, very famous because Moon at the top of a chart shows fame, and it's usually when it's aspecting something too. What was he famous for? Well, there's a trine down there to the second house, Chiron, and that is to wound. So he was famous for wounding, but he was also a thief. He wanted to go into that house when, oh gosh, I can't remember the name. What's the name of that road? Anyway, when they went into the house, he said, get all their money. So once a thief, always a thief. Cult leader, whatever, but he had to have more money constantly. So the other thing too is if you can see Mercury in green in the 6th house there, it's opposing Uranus. So it's constant interruptions, constant moves. I have a square to Uranus. I was always being moved around, and it's very unsettling. It is. You can't seem to have full relationships when you're younger because you're moved somewhere else. And for him, not just the friend circle, but his actual family. So another tragic childhood tale. So there's Mercury, he was as a child, Jupiter, juvenile. And then also notice up above there with the sun next to Venus, that's a blonde woman. And when it's in Scorpio, that's a sexy blonde woman. So I think that might be Sharon Tate. And so you can see there's a sextile to the 5th house, which is, an actress. Neptune is acting. Mars there. Now, this would be when he becomes around 17, 18. Mars conjunct Neptune. Suddenly gets into drugs, anything that he can get his hands on. And look how it sextiles to that blonde woman. So something just gives him the ability, this sextile, to get in and to kill Scorpio, to kill this blonde woman. It's in the 5th house. And what's the 5th house? Family. So the word family, Manson family, is going to be very prominent with his life. So it's the cult of the Manson family. Now in Virgo there, that is that's clothing. So clothing came into play here in the investigation. The cult leaders would leave their clothing behind, and they just threw it out the window. So I'm not exactly sure if that would work, but Virgo is clothing. It's also work too. And he had trouble with work. He had trouble getting work. So, but what's really interesting is as soon as he hit that male, or, as as soon as he became a man, Mars right there in the fifth house, squaring Chiron. What is Chiron? It's a scar. So he probably had a group of scars. It's in Gemini, could be twin scars, but what did he do? He put that scar on his forehead. So crazy that would see. I'm trying to think. Nazi. I mean, Mars square. Wasn't it the Nazi symbol? That might have been maybe a symbol of war or something German. Okay. So I don't know. I have to check that. I'm not sure if that was Nazi or not. But anyway, this is Bill Cosby. And I'll tell you what, this is one of the craziest stories. And you can see Bill at the bottom there. Bill, that's what he looked like when I grew up, like a dad, just the most wholesome guy. Boy, did he pull the wool over everybody's eyes. So I'm just going to look real quick here with Mars. That's where he was when he was younger. And it's in Scorpio. It does very well in Scorpio. He was a comedian, and you can see a trine there to Sun. Sun represents the MC. MC is in Leo. Leo means comedy. So he was very creative. He used drugs. He loved Quaaludes. And so there's that Neptune there at the top with the moon. So there's also famous actresses that he would, Neptune is an actress, moon is fame, famous actresses. And they almost, you can see a point of Thales there, which is where there's that L with the blue lines. That's kind of like what saved him for a long time. And I'm sure it was probably famous actresses validating him or backing him up so that he didn't get into trouble. And then Saturn there in Aries, that's when everything would hit the fan for him. He would be at war. And I wonder if that was when he first, I think that's when he first started the Cosby Show, because he was getting around to those Saturn years back then. In the fifth house is family. It sextiles Venus and Gemini. Gemini is television. So he's getting television money. And it's trining Black Moon Lilith. So he's able to be secretive in what he's doing as a father. He's easily able to go to the Hollywood scene, which is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is Hollywood. So he went to Hollywood, and he was a bad boy because of that Black Moon Lilith. Ooh, I don't like Black Moon Lilith. It is just a nasty, nasty point. And it's going to creep up in everybody's charts every single year. It's just, hopefully it's not part of a stellium, because then it's extra, extra strong. So I just threw Tom Hanks in here real quick because you can see some of these, like Mars in Pisces. That's when he was a young man. He was getting awards. It was a trine to Sun. Of course, Tom Hanks is not a predator, but you can see what happens to him. And once he becomes older, his symbol turns to Saturn. And he hasn't done as well as Saturn, because of retrograde. It means that he's in detriment. So he's had tougher times as an older man. And you can see with that square to Jupiter, that's his sun. Jupiter is someone's child in their chart. You can also see the symbol for child, the fifth house ruler, which is Saturn, and that's in the third. So you can just see that the family is in detriment because of that sun. And what happened? Sun's in jail, or Sun has done jail time. He's the black sheep of the family, done a lot of drugs. So that's what he wouldn't really have to deal with it when he was a younger man because they were kids. But as an older man, his son grows up and he has quite a few nice, very well established kids. But it was that one black sheep that caused such turmoil in his life. So I thought that was interesting how you can see that the 12th house still represents jail, which his son did. It represents drugs. And especially with that sextile to Neptune in the second house, the son had access to drugs and money for drugs. That's why potentially there was so many issues. So, okay. So I just put this away for a second. Now we have a couple of other people I wanted to look at. One second. Okay. I know, Angel. I'm telling you, he reminds me of my dad. So I really like Tom Hanks. He's such a good person, I think. And that's one of the reasons I pulled his chart, because it's like, okay, let's compare here. I mean, could Tom Hanks's chart look as bad as some of these others because he's so opposite? But it really does show how he's had a hard time with someone in jail, just not him. And so it's been very sad for him. Now you say in the ancient Indian language of Sanskrit, swastika means well-being. Oh, it was, yes, the swastika, right. The symbol has been used by Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains for millennia and is commonly assumed to be an Indian sign. Wow. Well, they had got some bad PR with those Nazis, huh? Sheesh. It's kind of like the American flag now. People don't see that as a symbol of freedom anymore, or it's a very divisive icon now, and it's very difficult to. People think twice before putting out their flags right now. So anyway, let me get to. I want to share. I was going to look up Scott Peterson's chart. And let's see, share screen. Here we go. Okay. Born October 24th, 1972. I mean, another, wow, 4 for 4. Mercury in Scorpio. Mind is on revenge or jealousy or just murder. Just a murderer. So I don't really know too much about his early life, but you can see that Jupiter there with Uranus. So something interrupts for him. And it's in Libra. So he wants a divorce. Uranus is to divorce, and Libra is marriage and relationships. So look at that opposition to Chiron. He wants to divorce by hurting his family. Chiron is to hurt, almost exactly on the cusp, which makes it super strong. The 5th house of family. Mars is abuse and blood. So, he's trying to be stable. It looks like Mars is trining Saturn, but he can't. And I'm trying to think, Saturn, obviously in retrograde, it is detrimented. So I don't know, that's television, and he was on television. So, but he didn't do very well on television, which would be the retrograde. So anyway, very interesting how he would, when he turned to his Mars symbol, he would want to divorce or to cut a relationship by way of harming his family. Okay, so I had another one. Scott Peterson. Oh, that's right. Hugh Hefner. Let's see. Hang on one second. This is another one. And I don't know if you watched The Secrets of Playboy. It's like I had to fast forward a lot of it because it was just so sad. But I needed to see all of it, and I'm glad I did because wow, what a story. And let me tell you, that's some karma right there to have something like this come out. It it clearly, in my opinion, shows that he was a predator. And okay, so I'm gonna look at some of your comments. It's not true crime, but have you ever done Angelina Jolie's chart? That would be interesting. I have, and I've actually put it on my website, which I'll show in a second. So, wow. So this shows Scott Peterson actually did want out. I thought he was just leading his mistress on. Um, I think no, I don't think so. I absolutely think that what was in his chart was to kill, to harm his family. I mean, that's what his destiny was, I think. But I'm sure a lot of people will have a different opinion. And yes, so similar to the Watt situation, just unbelievable. So we should look at Watts too. So anyway, let me just hang on one second. Mm, Okay, and I'm going to go and share screen. Here's Hugh Hefner. Okay, so I mean, of course, we have Scorpio, Saturn in Scorpio, and retrograde, just like Bill Cosby. They have very similar charts because they were born, at the same time, basically. And so they both had they both used quaaludes, on young women. And so Saturn retrograde in Scorpio is not ideal here. So he also has Mercury retrograde, which, starting out in life, that can be a little bit difficult. Probably moved around a lot. I know he had some very strict parents, very puritanical types of parents and family. So then going over to, looks like he was a pretty bad kid with that Jupiter there in the fifth house and the T square. But let's move on to Mars. He's in the fifth house there. And fifth house, there's Aquarius in it, which means unconventional. So he's an unconventional man, Mars. And it opposes Pluto. So he's fighting for unconventional sex. And by doing so, it becomes famous because it's in Cancer. Cancer is fame, especially in the 10th house. So it's very interesting there. His chart shows a lot of drugs because of that Neptune. And what's next to Neptune in this chart is Black Moon Lilith. So bad drugs, nefarious drugs. It's just using drugs for bad purposes. So, and when I saw the sun means a pimp. So he was, maybe pimping people out there using drugs. So, but I think it's really interesting, mostly that Saturn is in Scorpio and there's that T square to that. So it shows that the sexual themes were not normal. And, I mean, he was just so super motivated to get that, I guess. Well, you know what? He had a relationship and it didn't go well. And that was very scorpionic of him to, he wanted to make himself into something so that she would regret it. So that would be Scorpio coming in. But I would say that Aries really pushed him to becoming this icon, this fabulously wealthy person who lived in a castle. And what is a castle? Leo. So, and Regulus is right there. Look, there's drugs, Neptune, on Regulus in a castle. So, bad drugs in a castle, and conjunct part of fortune, which means a great success for a long time. So, very interesting there. Now, if you really wanted to, if you wanted to get more detail, what you would do is, and I hope you can see this. Are you able to see? Yeah, a very grody castle. Or is it a grotto that you're saying? Yeah, Hefner didn't really have to face the public scrutiny like Cosby did, maybe because Cosby was his father figure, right? But they were like two peas in a pod. So let's see. I want to go to, oh yeah. So what I want to do is I want to go to, you could pick a year. First of all, you go to the progressed secondary progressions, because this can show you even more information about what's happening. And Hefner really got into the bad stuff, late 70s, early 80s, and then he got married. So let's say 1980. I'm going to go to 1980. Progressions only. And then that's where you look to see what he's doing. So you can see how Mars there is in a real square to the eighth house. So at that point, it was the sexual revolution. Well, I mean, there were a couple sexual revolutions, but he was in a big fight with women's lib, but he had a trine to Saturn and Scorpio. He was still able to do his freaky things, and he was allowed to do it. Fifth house is family. Mars in Pisces, showing lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, lots of parties, fifth house parties. And MC is in Leo, which is also a party, because the fifth house is the natural sign for Leo. I always think of Jennifer Lopez. She's a Leo, and what does she do? She always sings about parties and having fun. And so you can see that he's able to have some fun, but it's being blocked by a group of people there. It'd be interesting to see what he was doing in August 1980. But so that's another technique. Okay, so yeah, Mars is the man. You can look in his chart and you can see what was going on. But look at the progressed, and that's really, it brings it to life a little bit as far as what his experience is at that moment. So I think I got everybody. Probably do a few more next time, maybe OJ. But yeah, that's true. There were so many women in business with him. They all must have kept it to themselves for the money, though. Yeah, I mean, they all protected him, and that's in that Playboy special. It's just, it's really eye-opening and unbelievable how wealth can, just like with Epstein. In fact, Hefner had, let me see here for a second. Is this Hugh Hefner? Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So Hefner had a second in command, Mary, who was just like, what's her name? Epstein's girl, Ghislaine. And so, yeah, so I would look to, this is Hugh Hefner's chart. And I mean, Venus is in Pisces, And of course, that's beautiful women, and it's also actresses. But Venus with Moon is a woman who helps him. So right there in the sixth house. That's interesting. Maybe we should look at, I want to look at um, Epstein's chart, and then I'll finish. Epstein chart. What's his name? Epstein. I forget his first name. Jeff, that's right. Jeff. Joe here. It's Joseph. Okay, I'll just go to this one. Not unlike Hef's. Okay, let me share this. How do I share this? Okay, hold on. Go to this one. Share this one. Okay, can you see this? This is Jeff Epstein's chart. Okay, and look how he has Venus in Pisces, which is women appear and disappear, which is Pisces, actresses. It means the lovers. Mars and Venus mean lovers. But look how there's moon there. You could combine. Well, Venus is trining Cancer, which is to help. So whether it's moon or Cancer, there's a woman there that will help. But look, and that's definitely Ghislaine, and she's at the bottom there. She falls because of him. What a chart that is. Now, he would be Saturn when he allegedly died, and Saturn in Libra. Saturn next to Neptune. What is Neptune? It's a big scandal. As soon as he turned to Saturn, that's when the scandal began. Neptune's next to Saturn, and a big, big mystery. So that's when the mystery began of whether or not he committed suicide. Sun in Aquarius. Aquarius is suicide. So very interesting about that. I think I'm going to need a whole other show for Epstein. So anyway, yes, they threw her under the bus, in my opinion, but she's not innocent. Yeah, I don't think she is either, and neither was Hugh Hefner's right-hand woman. Just enabled the abuse, and I guess nothing will happen to her like Ghislaine, but God, I can't believe I'm getting her name wrong because I saw a whole documentary on that one, but I forgot. But yeah, they both have enablers, like Bill and Nancy and Oliver Twist. Yes, Ghislaine Maxwell, right. So anyway, that's all I have for tonight. I think for me, it was so interesting to see how much Mercury and Scorpio, I mean, 9 times out of 10. And no matter what anyone says about killers they tend to be this, like Gemini, they tend to be that. It's all for the press. It's not true. It's got to be a combination of things, but lots of Scorpio. That's what I think. Thank goodness I only have one planet in Scorpio, but the story's not over yet. So, well, thank you, everyone who joins in later on this channel. I hope you learned a little bit just looking at the charts and comparing them. And we will see you next time. Thank you, Angel, for joining me. And I will be on again with tarot cards this Sunday at 9 Eastern. So see you then. Thanks, Angel.